Okie dokie, I believe we are all the way live. Hello and welcome to my graveyard. I'm your host of the evening, the Cemetery Man from Salem, Mass. Always taking names and kicking candy ass. Live in living color here with you only on Grande's Graveyard. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another edition of the show where tonight we've done several actor spotlights in the past, but tonight it is the very first actress spotlight. An episode that's long coming, long in the waits, and an episode that I've really wanted to do for the longest time because I believe that this woman that we're spotlighting here tonight is the greatest actress of all time. I've debated it, I've thought about it, and over the past week of going back and rewatching some of these classic films that star the late, great Bette Davis, I've just come to the conclusion that there really is no more debate to be had. Bette is the greatest of all time. So very excited here tonight as instead of the other actor spotlight videos where I do a top 10 of the person's career, I wanted to specifically spotlight 3 horror movies that Bette Davis did in this period of the early 1960s. Of course, tonight we'll be talking about Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, of course, Hush, Hush, Sweet Charlotte, and lastly but not leastly, The Nanny from 1965. So a lot of good Bette Davis cinema here, and I'd be remiss to not mention how I really stumbled upon Bette Davis, because today actually somebody at work had pointed out, he was like, Bette Davis, you think that's the greatest actress of all time? He's like, how would someone of your age know or appreciate Bette Davis? And I said, honestly, it's all to be thanked and appreciated from my grandmother. Of course, now I was really close with my grandmother. I watched countless amount of films with her over the years when I was a child. And I always wanted to get into older cinema, and she was the, kind of the light that guided me through those tunnels. And of course, one of the actresses I was always most enamored with was Bette Davis, and she showed me a movie called All About Eve that to this day is probably one of the best films I've ever seen. I love All About Eve. It's a great, great movie. And of course, the time came and she knew I loved the horror genre so much and it was my favorite thing in the world. So I had to ask the question and she had to deliver the answer. Was Bette Davis ever in any good horror movies? I remember asking that question and she said, absolutely. I'm going to go to the library. I'm going to get some books. I'm going to get some novels and stuff. And she was a big Agatha Christie reader, loved Agatha Christie. And I remember she rented from the library the movie we'll be talking about here tonight, Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. And then, of course, upon a few weeks to months later, I was introduced to Hush, Hush, Sweet Charlotte. And then it was on Turner Classic Movies where I actually finally saw The Nanny. So very cool, to be spotlighting Bette Davis here tonight. And I'm a big fan of all 3 of these movies. For what it's worth, the amount of it's crazy. Like the amount of shows and movies I've watched for show prep over the year. I don't know if you had 3 in a row as good as this. Like all 3 of these movies are absolutely fantastic. So I'm very excited to get into this here tonight. And I wanted to thank, of course, not just the late great Bette Davis, but my late great grandmother. So thank you to both of you because this episode wouldn't obviously be possible without you. But I've neglected the chat. What's going on in the chat? We got Joe Mama and Naheezy, all caps. Let's go. Woo! Hell yeah. Joe Mama's in the house. What's going on, buddy? Miss C is here. Ciao, Grande and Graveyardian friends. Now, cool thing about this episode, Miss C is a diehard Bette Davis fan as well, and she asked me if she could be a part of this episode in any way, shape, or form, and I said, hell yeah, Miss C. So Miss C was kind enough to go ahead. She recorded a 7-minute long video of her reviews for all 3 of these movies. Tidy, quick, nice, short, sweet reviews. And Miss C, I'm very happy to have you make your Graveyardian debut via satellite, I guess, here tonight. So I have that clip to play so you guys can all hear Miss C's thoughts on these movies, and then I'll go through them one by one, Graveyardian style. So, Miss C, happy to have you in the house here. We got Slasher Fred. Fasten your seatbelt, folks. It's going to be a bumpy show. All right. I don't know. Does that mean I don't know. Is it a Bette Davis fan here? Are we skeptical on these movies? I don't know. But I'll tell you one thing. It's a lot less bumpier than the road we were on last week with, movies like Soul Survivors and I Know What You Did Last Summer. We went from some shaky cinema there to, oh, man, this is some of the best type of cinema you can have is the movies we're going to be talking about here tonight. All the Girls Thinks He's a Spy. He's got Bette Davis eyes. That's absolutely it. Only. Autocorrect thinks I'm spelling better instead of bet. LOL, I wish someone would teach autocorrect to figure out my spelling. Well, we can't all have what we want, I guess. Triple H is in the house. Hey, everyone. Horror Head Heather checks in. What's going on, Heather? Hope all is well with you, my friend. We got Mateo here. Ciao, Grande. Very intriguing spotlight. I'm not very familiar with Bette Davis at all. but All About Eve is a milestone in cinema history. Hi to the whole graveyard chat. Yeah, exactly. Like that was, I remember, I mean, so many great movies my grandmother showed me. Her favorite movie was Gone with the Wind. And I watched that. And it's funny enough, we'll be talking about an actress that appears in Gone with the Wind and Olivia de Havilland when we get to Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte tonight. But I mean, so many great movies. Inherit the Wind, Gone with the Wind, Mr. Blandings Builds His Dream Home, Philadelphia Story. So many great movies that she introduced me to. All the Andy Hardy movies aren't great movies, but again, they're kind of fun popcorn movies. I don't know. It's just so many great films in black and white era in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s, and John Ford and all these things that really opened my eyes up to see, hey, we can't just, I obviously I love horror and I love a specific eras and stuff like that, but I was so happy to be educated on what came before and how this was all kind of built and established and stuff like that, when it was more of the studio system, if you will. And I was just so happy, and I think I'm like so like, I guess privileged would be a great word for it. I was so privileged to be, introduced to all this cinema. Very fortunate, I guess. Really cool stuff. How are you, buddy? By the way, I just celebrated my 41st birthday. Anthony, happy 41st, my friend. Hope all is well with you. Happy birthday, Anthony. Ciao, Matteo. Have to agree, she's the greatest of all time. I don't have all, but most. My top 5 being All About Eve, The Little Foxes, Now Voyager. Now Voyager is absolutely fantastic. I love that movie. I'm glad you brought that up because it would not have come to my brain, but Now Voyager was great. Beyond the Forest and Another Man's Poison. Dude, great picks. Yeah, no, if this was an episode where I would do a top 10, I'll be honest with you, it would have been a little bit harder for me just because it's weird. Throughout watching these movies this week for show prep, it was weird not having my grandmother here. Like it felt like there was a void on the couch next to me. I was like, man, like it's just so weird sometimes to revisit films from that era. You go ahead and you miss people that you watch these films with. And it was cool. Like Monday, me and my dad actually joined me to watch Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte. He loves Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte. And, it was cool to watch with him. And he had the big quote. He was like, this is a lot better than the horror crap you watch. I was like, what do you mean? I was like, this is a horror movie, bro. And he looks at me, he goes, what do you mean? Well, horror, somebody has to be getting their head chopped off. And I'm like, buddy, somebody does get their head chopped off in Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte. So it was funny. We had a nice time watching. But again, though, I felt that void with her not in the room. It was really, it's hard for me. Like, I don't know, call me soft, call me whatever you want to call me. It's just weird not having her there. So a top 10 would have been really hard because it's 10 films that I've got to watch and kind of miss the person. So I was like, let me stick strictly with horror because obviously Horror Channel, my favorite actress. Let's talk about 3 really great movies and 3 great performances. And this way I could shine the spotlight longer on 3 individual films as opposed to kind of briefly going over 10. So that's kind of why I didn't do the typical, spotlight rundown like I have done in the past. But if people really want it, if people want a Bette Davis top 10, by all means, I can totally do that. Evil Connor's in the house with a pretty cool little thumbnail, Final Destination 3. I think, oh my God, what the hell? Mary Elizabeth Winstead. That's right. Thank you, Granny Graveyard. Oh, okay. I read it too fast. Granny Graveyard. Hell yeah. She would love that honor. She'd be like, they called me what? Linda Lou, double L is in the heezy. Hey, Grande, Linda Lou, who? What's going on, my friend? That line is from the movie All About Eve. Okay, there you go. Well, it's been a minute, as they say, Slasher Fred, since I've seen All About Eve. So there is that, but that's a great film. Really, really great film. Let's see. All About Eve is so good. Totally. Ciao, Miss C. Now Voyager reduces me to tears. Not in a bad way. I'm just so enhanced with Betty's performance. Yeah, Betty is fantastic. Not just his head, his hand was cut off too. That's right. And his hand. I was like, I'll give you one better than his head. His goddamn hand got cut off too. And he's like, oh, all the blood. I'm like, there was blood, plenty of blood, buddy. Like, it was so funny. He was putting down the genre, and I'm like, hold up. Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte is absolutely a horror movie. And he's like, it's a story. It's a mystery, He was trying to go to bat for it. But we got a bunch of people in the house. I'm very happy to see that. And a bunch of people, you guys are going to be hearing me talk for a few minutes because we're going to play a quick clip that Miss C recorded specially for you guys, especially for this show. So Miss C, if you'd like to take it away, I've got this right here. And we'll go ahead and play your clip right now.
Ciao, Grande and Graveyardian friends. This is your old pal Miss C here. When I found out Grande was planning to do a special about Bette Davis, I asked if I could be part of it, and Grande was kind enough to let me. I've always been a big Bette Davis fan. But as I've had a chance to recently rewatch her old movies, I've grown to have an even deeper appreciation than I had of her before. And I can honestly say, in my opinion, Betty Davis is indeed well deserving of the title, one of the queens of Hollywood. Now, the movies I want to talk about are all from the 1960s. And 1960s horror is a lot different than the horror I'm used to watching. And so, with that in mind, I had to go in with a different mindset. And I'm glad I did because, as I said before, it gave me more appreciation of Betty Davis and what she was able to do, but also an appreciation for the movies. The first movie I want to talk to you about is The Nanny. Um, the Nanny, I'm going to be honest with you, it's not one of my favorite movies. It's a little too dramatic and over the top. There's nothing wrong with the actors or their performances. It's just it's too out there for me. So this little boy, he won't have anything to do with his nanny because he's convinced she's responsible for the accidental death of his sister. And he's not wrong. It's just a process to get there. For one, the father can't be bothered. The mother is on the verge of a nervous breakdown at the least little thing. And the boy, honestly, I think a lot of his problems could have been solved with a good old fashioned spanking. But I'm not going to go on a Miss C rant. I'll just say it's not for me. And the only saving grace to that movie is indeed Betty Davis. The next movie I want to talk to you about is Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte. Now, you may or may not know this, but originally this was supposed to be a follow up to Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, and they hired Joan Crawford and Betty Davis. But I guess those two were well into their feud by this time, and Joan Crawford claimed she was sick, but there's some controversy on whether she was sick or she was just faking it. But at any rate, they had to replace her with Olivia de Havilland. And the movie basically centers around Charlotte is being forced to sell her plantation home left to her by her father, I guess. And through the course of the movie, you find out that Charlotte believes she is responsible for the death of her boyfriend. And it's not said she has dementia, but it seems to me pretty clear that's what they were getting at. Um, whew, I don't really know what else to say. It's hard for me to describe this movie because there's so much going on in it. But I will say Olivia de Havilland as her cousin Miriam gives one hell of a performance. Honestly, I never thought, and I'm still not sure I completely believe anybody can outshine Betty Davis in a role. But I will say Olivia de Havilland gave her one hell of a run for her money. And that brings me to my favorite film of all time. Well, my favorite Betty Davis film of all time, Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. Betty Davis is absolutely unhinged in this movie, and I'm here for every single second of it. I love her performance. Uh, so, as you can probably guess by the title, Baby Jane is about a childhood star and her sister. And as Baby Jane got older, she kind of flopped in Hollywood, while her sister was able to have a successful career. And at one point, there's a car accident, and Baby Jane's sister Blanche gets paralyzed, and Jane has to take care of her. And oh man, I'm telling you, she is something. it is a true pleasure for me to watch her performance in this movie. Um, she's bratty. She acts like a child, not getting her way at some points. She's mean and cruel to her sister. She's convinced that her sister is responsible for her not having a successful career. And we learn early on that she is able to imitate herself perfectly. And that plays into my favorite scene where Jane finds out that her sister cut off the money for her to order booze. So Jane, she's like, all right, just a minute. I'll put my sister on the phone so you can get this straightened out. So she goes and she pretends to be her sister, and imitates her perfectly just so she can get her booze. I thought that was awesome. Um, Now, I don't think at the time when they made this movie, Joan and Betty Davis were fully into their feud at the time, but I do know that Joan was apparently jealous when Betty Davis was nominated for a third Oscar, and I guess she felt like she should have been nominated as well. And so she went out and purposely tried to sabotage with a campaign. She tried to sabotage Betty Davis from getting the Oscar. And if she would have got the Oscar, it would have been the third Oscar. And at that time, no woman had ever received 3 Oscars. So it really is a shame that happened. But it doesn't change my opinion of the film. It's great. And I do really believe Betty Davis did deserve the Oscar for that movie. She is just fantastic. Anyways, I guess that's about all I got to say for now. Thank you, Grande, for once again inviting me to be on your channel, and I hope you have a great time. Bye.
Hell yeah. Well, everybody give a round of applause for Miss C, who was wanting to be a part of this. So I'm happy that we could get you on the show in that way, in that capacity. Very cool, interesting thoughts on all 3 movies. And I'm excited to get into these too. Now, it was interesting. Miss C went backwards. Miss C went from The Nanny, which is the movie that came out last chronologically, all the way back to Baby Jane. So you know what? I'll take a page from the Miss C book here tonight. I'll go backwards too. Instead of going from Whatever Happened to Baby Jane to The Nanny like I was going to do, we'll work it backwards. We'll start from 65 and we'll stop at 62, only on the Graveyard. So everybody giving Miss C a hand. Great work, Miss C. Absolutely. One of our thanks for thank you, Miss C. I appreciate it. Big fan of the show, and I'm happy you could be a part of this one in particular. So really cool. But I guess without further ado, we will get into my thoughts on these movies. Now, like I said in the outro, I really, really, really like all 3 of these movies. So I'm pretty high on all of them. You were doing least favorite to favorite. Okay, no problem at all. I'm going to work it backwards, though. I think that's a little bit of a change up here. Why not? We'll start in the year 1965 with this is a really underrated movie, in my opinion. I am a big, big fan, and I mean, ever since the first time I saw it, it really disturbed me. And I think it's a psychological horror gem that not a lot of people are going to discuss or talk about. And while it is, a great movie too, I don't think it's as good as the 2 Robert Aldrich movies. Like, I would agree with Miss C that it's definitely of these 3 the weakest, but that's not saying it's bad at all. In fact, I think it's a damn great movie. I think it just speaks to the testament of how perfect the other 2 are. But of course, I'm talking to you here tonight on Grande's Graveyard is The Nanny from 1965. We got a brief plot synopsis. Bette Davis is an English nanny whose charge is a rude 10-year-old boy named Joey, just discharged from a disturbed children's home where he'd spent 2 years undergoing treatment for drowning his little sister in the bathtub. He returns to an unloving father, fragile mother, and doting nanny whom he hates. Suspicion arises again when his mother is poisoned, and Joey continues to insist that his nanny is responsible. Joey contends the nanny was responsible for his little sister's death, and only the upstairs neighbor girl believes him. Yes, a little bit of a mouthful there of a brief plot synopsis, but this is The Nanny from 1965. I mean, this is a great psychological horror movie, in my opinion. And I'll never forget the first time I watched it. It was on Turner Classic Movies, and they used to do these things where it was like actor spotlight days, and they may still do it. I don't watch Turner Classic Movies as much as now as I used to, but I'll never forget they did Bette Davis Day, and me and my grandmother, I believe it was a Sunday. I think it was a Sunday, and we just stayed in. It was like the middle of winter, and we watched a bunch of Bette Davis movies in a row. And this was one of them that just captivated me because obviously I'm a diehard horror guy. And for this movie, I'd never heard anybody talk about it. It does get its good reviews. I mean, it has a 7.1 on IMDb. So it's not a movie that's not, reviewed highly or thought about in high regard. It's just not a movie that I had ever heard talked about or very much on here on this platform. And that's why I really wanted to shine a spotlight on it. Now, again, this is different from the Robert Aldrich films, which are definitely more, there's more high energy in those two movies, for lack of a better term, whereas this is a absolute depressing, drab, dreary, triple D's, if you will, psychological horror film where Bette Davis is playing a completely different role than Charlotte or Baby Jane Hudson. Here she is this she seems very nice, seems very innocent, seems very loving and friendly nanny as the movie opens on this like little playground, and she's kind of walking around it to get to the house that she, to serve this family that she serves. And we hear that, of course, the little brother of the family, he is this like little asshole kid, this little obnoxious, evil little kid who, gets into fights and causes trouble and is a brat, basically, for lack of a better term. But of course, his sister a few years ago drowned in the bathtub, and there's a big controversy as to how that happened. Now, the little boy, of course, points the finger at Bette Davis and says that she did it on purpose. And of course, Bette Davis claims her innocence. No, it was an accident. And a lot of this film plays with the psychology of who do you believe. It's a lot like that film Doubt with, of course, Meryl Streep and Philip Seymour Hoffman, may he rest in peace, where it's you hear both sides of the story and you're trying to figure out who do you believe exactly. And we're kind of left in the middle here. Of course, I loved the performances all around, especially from the mother. The description mentioned her as a doting mother. I mean, this is a woman that lost her little girl. I mean, this girl couldn't have been any older than 4 or 5 at the oldest. I think she was about 4 years old. And you see how much this has just completely destroyed her and made her depressed and sad and just really wimpy. Whereas the father is getting angry and has less of a patience and less of a fuse, if you will, very short fuse towards the son, which, he's trying to get help. They put him in an institution for a couple of years, but it doesn't seem to be doing any good. This kid is just still an obnoxious brat. He'll throw rocks at the milkman. He'll cause havoc in the house. He's just a bad kid. He's really not a good kid at all. And then, of course, a series of flashbacks is shown as we slowly but surely kind of get a little bit more and more of how the little girl died. I loved the format of this movie. I loved how the story was told. I thought Bette Davis, I loved to see, after watching Baby Jane and watching Hush Hush respectively, to see her dial it back here. I always think the best actors and actresses not only can go over the top in an entertaining way and choose scenery and just deliver electric performances, which is what I would consider her performance in Baby Jane to be. It's an electric performance. Here she dials the tone that dial back to like 5, and she's very stoic throughout the entire picture. And I thought she just did a wonderful job. It was such a breath of fresh air to say, hey, she doesn't have to go over the top all the time in a horror film. Here she is playing a very like level-headed character, or so we think. It's a really good movie. I just really liked everything about this. And I thought that the sequences of horror were really well directed. Now, this director, I wasn't as familiar with any of his other work, Sean Holt. I thought he did a really, really good job at telling this story. And we get little instances to make us think, is Bette Davis evil? Like there's a scene where she's holding this pillow, and she's got it, and she's walking into the child's room, and the mother wakes up and she goes, what are you doing? What are you doing with that pillow? And she goes, oh, nothing. I'm just going to give him another pillow. And yeah, it sounds harmless, sounds innocent, and it looks innocent enough, but think about it. Maybe she was going in to suffocate his little ass, and it's like, you're like, whoa, like, was that what was going on there? Some interesting things. There's a scene where maybe or maybe not somebody got poisoned, and did she do it? Did the kid do it? There's a lot of, what do you think? Is this kid evil? Is Bette Davis evil? Is there some kind of truth in between? What's going on? And the film does a really good job of keeping you on your toes with that. And I really appreciated that style. Now, it is a very, like I said, depressing film. And it's not a film for everybody. And we're going to get into some spoilers here. But getting into spoilers, we finally do get a flashback scene of what happened to the little sister. And that's wherein lies the absolute horror of this movie. Now, we are, shown the little boy is playing with his train track set, and the little sister says, "Hey, can I play with you?" And he says, "Screw off. No, get out of here." And the little girl has her little doll, and she goes into the bathroom. She drops the doll into the tub, and then she kind of goes to get it on a step stool and hits her head. And so she's unconscious in the bathtub. Bette Davis comes in, and we don't know why at first, but she looks very distraught and upset, and she's trying to hold in her emotions. She's trying to hold back what looks like tears as she comes in. Where's your sister? Oh, I don't know. She's around somewhere. Maybe she's in the bathroom. Well, Bette Davis hears that, but turns on the tub, and she's looking around for the kid to try to put her into the bath. And of course, she opens the curtains, and they did a great job here. The editor did a wonderful job just immediately cutting the scene. Like, we don't hear a scream and over the top yell, somebody throwing themselves on the floor. You just get curtain open, and then you let our imaginations fill in the rest of that horror. We know how horrible that must have been, how terrifying that must have been of a sight. We didn't have to see it. We just feel that. And that's, to me, psychological horror at its absolute best. I loved how that was edited and directed and acted the whole way through. Now we get a little bit of backstory, though, as to why Bette Davis was so distraught at this time. And to me, it kind of revolves the entire theme of the movie once you get this revelation that Bette Davis's daughter in the movie, she had tried to get an illegal abortion. And Bette Davis comes to this kind of shit apartment in town, and she gets there, and the doctor informs her, "Your daughter's dead." And he does it in such a careless, heartless, emotionless way where he's just, yeah, she's dead. And Betty walks in and looks, and you just, it's like, oh my God, like, this mother just lost not only her daughter, but the daughter or son that her kid was going to have. And she's just, in that moment, her acting, again, not going over the top, not yelping and jumping and diving under the bed and no, she again bottles it up so well, and you feel it like kind of coming out of the seams, but it doesn't quite get all out. And to me, again, that's great acting. I loved how that was done. And then of course she walks back to the apartment, and then the scene that we saw earlier with the kid falling into the tub, that happens. So she lost her daughter's potential daughter or son, grandkid. And then she lost the little girl that she was taking care of, being paid to be taken care of, all due to a drowning accident, a freak accident. All because, again, maybe the little brother didn't let her play, maybe because she had too many things on her mind, turned it on, didn't look into the tub. And, the death of an innocent person was caused because of these emotions. It's great. I thought it was it's sad. It's definitely sad. I mean, it's worth crying over. I mean, it's a damn sad scene and movie. But I thought it was so effectively done. I really, really liked that. And then, of course, we find out that Bette Davis is criminally insane, and she's going somewhere, to deal with it. But they do really, I think, in psychological horror terms, fuck with you. They do a really good job of fucking with you, where there's a scene where she thinks that she's washing the little girl. She has this kind of, I guess, illusion that she's washing the little girl in the tub, and the little kid's laughing and, ha ha, nanny, and she's washing her. And what she's really doing is she's drowning the younger boy. She's drowning him. And then she realizes, she's like, no, not again, not another one. That's the only time in the picture where she finally lets something out. And it's just some of the best acting you've ever seen. I really, really loved this movie. I thought this was great. To me, a really underrated psychological horror movie that more people need to see. I don't know if it's streaming, like where people can watch this. I found it on Plex and downloaded it. Well, refound it for me up right Plex and downloaded it. Let's be honest. I think this is a damn good movie. I highly recommend The Nanny to people. But let's go back to the chat. I've been neglecting y'all for far too long. I think we were here. Somebody else said, great job, Miss C. Absolutely. I agree with that. Miss C, did she start in a silent movie actress, or she started after? She was working at a bridal shop until her boyfriend kicked her out. Wow, that's sounds great. Reminds me of Orphan. Yeah, it's funny. They really want you to think that it's the little boy, but the little boy is like swearing up and down, it's the nanny. She's no good. She's no good. And I like that it's really kind of neither. Like the nanny was not a bad lady. She wasn't intentionally evil. This was someone that lost her kid too. Like you get the idea and step into the shoes of someone who takes care of others' children. Like you look at these people that can afford a nanny, that can afford a caretaker, and then through their eyes, they lost their child and it wasn't even on their watch. And you get that. But then at the other flip of the coin, these are people too. This nanny was a person too. She had a family of her own. She had a kid of her own that she lost that same day. And to me, it's just all of those emotions flooding into what causes her to kind of lose her mind. And it's not done in an over the top way. It's done in a really, I would say, rather classy way. I loved how that was done. I thought it was really, really good. Betty was not in silent films. No, she started in talkies. Yeah, The Nanny is great. I love it, but it's the least favorite. I would agree with that. Of these three, yeah, it does. But again, it's in the company of it's impossible. But I'm happy. I know there was another one from around this time called Dead Ringer, which I've never seen. That's apparently, I believe she plays herself as twins, I think is the gimmick there. I've never seen that. Now, this is a Hammer horror film. That was the last Hammer horror film ever to be shot in black and white. So that's a cool little fun fact. Almost 60 years later, there hasn't been another black and white Hammer horror film. Now, I've never been a big Hammer horror guy, but I thought this was really effective. One of the better Hammer horror films out there for sure. The Lodge would be right there. I love The Lodge as well. Mateo saying thank you. I have never heard anyone mention Betty doing silent films, but I can't say for sure. Okay, well, they did. A lot of these movies that these stars were in, like Bette Davis in the 30s, people didn't go just to see them for the entertainment, but also to escape from the Great Depression. That's absolutely true. Now, my grandmother was born in like 36, I want to say. So obviously that was a little bit, the Depression times were before them. But with this, she always tells the story of going to see Gone with the Wind in the theater and being amazed when the little kid fell off the horse. And, when movies cost like a nickel or a dime or a quarter, I forget. And she always told you how much she loved the value that you got out of going to the movies. Like you'd get the Mighty Mouse cereal, you'd get the newsreels, you'd get 2 movies, all of that popcorn, all for a quarter. And now it's just so much more that it's like, kind of shocking, man. She began acting in films in 1931 in the film Bad Sister, to be specific. It was after silent films died. Joan, however, was in some silent films. Okay, talking about Joan Crawford, and some of those, I believe some of those might be shown in Baby Jane, the silent pictures that Joan Crawford were in. You get a lot of their early pictures, pictures within pictures in Baby Jane, which is cool. We got good brother Tom in the house. The Undead of Night. Hi, John and chat. First time watching me of The Nanny. I thought it was great, especially the ending with Betty's acting. I agree, man. I like wholeheartedly agree with everything you said. Yeah, her acting is so much more realistic in this movie. Like, if you want the fun, energetic, like I said, electric Bette Davis, you definitely want to watch something like Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. But if you really want like emotional, raw, gritty performance from Betty, I would look no further than The Nanny. She's so good in this movie. And I agree, yeah, it's a sad movie. It really is. But it's a great one. It really is. Like, I'm happy to have spotlighted this particular movie on here because it's like not a movie I hear mentioned much. And I think it kind of deserves it. Now, again, yeah, in this company, is it the weakest? Sure. But again, I would say it's like an 8.5 out of 10. Like, it's that good. Maybe even a 9. That's how much I like the Nanny. I think it's a really good movie. I love the movie The Watcher in the Woods from 1980. That does, yes. That Davis, from the beginning of the movie, her character is made to look like a villain because she got that sinister look. Absolutely. And what's funny about these movies too, all 3 of them horror movies, all 3 of them, kind of depict her or make her look like she could be or is the villain. And really in all of them, there's a kind of silver line. Now, Baby Jane, maybe not, but Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte and this, she's really not. I think it's just like she lost her mind here, but it's a tragic, like, you feel sympathy. There's definitely sympathy to be felt for her character because she lost her child too. We're all only human. We're all, in that kind of same boat. I wouldn't have many tears if she unended the boy, just saying, oh, okay, you're saying that you would like to see her kill the boy. I've heard people say that. I read reviews where the little kid annoyed them so much. I thought he did fine considering what the part was, but I could totally understand if somebody was so annoyed with the kid that they didn't enjoy the film. Bette Davis always makes me feel sleepy whenever she's in a film. It's her voice. It makes me sleepy every time, no matter what role she's in. Wow, that's interesting. I'm the opposite. I hear Bette Davis, I wake up, man. Bette Davis is just money to me. But I get it. No worries. The monkey's in the house. I feel you, me, and autocorrect have a love-hate relationship. Mostly, I hate it. Well, that's fine. I watched Burnt's Offerings after The Nanny. I imagine Aunt Elizabeth to be the nanny in America. Fit well with the scene where Karen Black blamed her for turning on the gas in the son's room. Wow, never thought of it that way. Oh, man, that's pretty cool. But I know Burnt's Offerings is not one that you would say is like one of your favorite haunted house movies. But Tom did an awesome video of top 10 haunted house movies. Burnt Offerings is my favorite. And like, I always love that Bette Davis is in there. Now, of course, that movie doesn't work without Oliver Reed and Karen Black. And I love Betty being there. And of course, Burgess Meredith in the beginning. Really, really great cast. But that's such an interesting way of looking at it. Yeah, like her character, yeah, she's just now this old lady, a retired old woman. Dead ringer Bet is twins, kills her twin, and tries to take over her. That sounds like, I've got to see that. Like, that just sounds too much fun. I've never seen that movie. I've got to track it down. So maybe if we'll do another down the road Bette Davis spotlight, we'll watch Dead Ringer for the first time, because I've never ever seen that. I know that was made in between. It was like Baby Jane, it was Hush Hush, then it was Dead Ringer, and then it was The Nanny, like all in a row. And that was like her horror run. And like, I would love to see Dead Ringer. I've never seen it. What up, Grande? Honky Digital. Dude, Honky's always watching the replays. So thank you so much for that. Cheers to you, my friend. I don't have any drink to hold up. But yeah, no, I'm happy you caught a live here, man. Very cool to have you in the Heezy. Grande, Wicked Stepmother is my number. Is it really? Wow. You know, I've read that was her biggest payday, which is crazy because, of course, that was released the same year she died, unfortunately, in 1989, was Wicked Stepmother. Not a good movie by any chance. But hey, look, it's somebody's favorite. There you go. She is so not the villain in Charlotte. She's 100% the victim. Yes, exactly. But again, when the movie starts, they're like she's crazy. She's got a gun. She took a shot at George Kennedy. Like, all three of them are like, here, you know, like, we're going to present something like, you know, the way you would perceive it. And then as the movie goes on, we unravel a little bit more of the story, and we see that her characters aren't so one-dimensional as they are presented to be, I guess. The full movie of The Nanny is on YouTube. There you go. Okay, so you can watch The Nanny free on YouTube. It's a really good psychological horror movie. Thank you for letting us know that. I think there is sort of a silver lining in Baby Jane. I felt like the beach scene represents Jane finally being free. Absolutely, and we'll get there. Wicked Stepmother has a reference to The Wizard of Oz when the female protagonist throws water on her and she says, "It didn't work, did it, Dorothy?" Oh my gosh, I did not think Wicked Stepmother was going to come up, but here we go. Great Slasher Fred, my favorite. Okay, I mean, from her demons. No worries. There's Dead Ringers with Jeremy Irons as well. It might be elusive. Oh, Dead Ringers is great movie. That's one of my favorite Cronenberg movies. It's that one is the last one where it's borderline. Like, is this a horror movie? Like, it has some body horror elements. It has some psychological horror elements, but it's also a great drama. And Jeremy Irons gives his best performance in that movie. I don't know. I would say yes, but it's also not at the same time. That's a movie I did a Cronenberg special really early on in this channel's run, and I talked about Dead Ringers, but holy shit, that's a great one. I don't know if they have any relation or if they're based on a book or something. I'd have to see the Bette Davis one. Maybe we'll do a versus down the road, because my favorite all-time actress against Jeremy Irons' best all-time role, I mean, that would make for some great, graveyardian content. I haven't seen any of these movies, just All About Eve. Well, All About Eve is a fucking great one, and it's arguably better than all of these. But I would say these next two I would prefer a little bit more. She was the villain so often, from Jess Bell to Little Foxes to Baby Jane. So no matter what, she was exactly. And I think that was really smart in the case of The Nanny specifically, because again, on the surface, it's like to me, if you ask me, I see this poster and I'm thinking you're going to get a movie like Flowers in the Attic. I'm thinking you're going to get like a very bitchy, like Nurse Ratched type of character. Like that's what I thought when I first saw the movie. I was like, okay, it's going to be, she's taking care of X amount of kids and she's just this evil, crazy, over the top Baby Jane. That's what I thought I was getting into, but it's not the movie you get at all. And I was thrilled to not get that movie. I was like, all right, I've seen Flowers in the Attic. I've seen it done by a really, really good actress. I want to see something else. And The Nanny, I thought, was a very good like twist on psychological horror. Has anyone seen Ryan Murphy's series in the TV called Feud? Oh, dude, I wish. Now, I never got a chance to watch it, but I am obviously really into that whole feud because I'm such a big Baby Jane fan. And, Susan Sarandon, I believe, plays Bette Davis. And then I think, oh my God, what's her name? Jessica Lange, I believe, plays Joan Crawford on it. And I know, and then Alfred Molina, Doc Ock himself, play Robert Aldrich, which, oh man, like to me, those three, that's great casting. Like I've got to see that. I've seen clips, but I've never seen like the full episodes of it. So I've really got to see Feud because I mean, I'm just so into this story and I would love to see it acted by world-class actors like that. So I really got to check that out. I learned 2 new word meanings from the Nanny: draughts for checkers and overlaying for suffocating. Oh yeah, there you go. It's always good to learn a little bit of the vocabulary. Linda Lou, I haven't seen Feud, but I'm the same way. I always wanted to see it. I just never got the chance to. Linda Lou. That is the Nanny from 1965. I really enjoy that movie. I'm glad I got to talk about it here tonight on Grande's Graveyard. And we'll continue our tradition and working backwards here to a movie that if you had asked me a week ago, I would have said is number 2 behind Baby Jane. Upon a rewatch, it's just as good, if not better. It really, really is. I really believe this next movie could be argued to be better than Baby Jane. It's so damn close, but it has grown so much. Like it used to be like in the 7.5, 8 range. This is a 10. I'm sorry. This next movie is one of my all-time favorite horror movies of not even just of the 1960s. I'm not even going to put an era on it. It's just one of the best horror movies of all time. I love this movie, this next one. Its 60-year anniversary will be celebrated this year. If it wasn't already, I didn't look at the exact release date, which we can, but this is from the year 1964. And I'm telling you, people, I'm telling you here tonight on Grande's Graveyard, Hush, Hush, Sweet Charlotte. Yes, Hush, Hush, Sweet Charlotte from 1964. Brief plot synopsis: an aging, reclusive Southern belle, plagued by a horrifying family secret, descends into madness after the arrival of a lost relative. Wow. I remember the initial viewing of this movie. I was really excited for it because I loved Baby Jane. And I remember it was a few weeks or months later, we rented this one from the library and I liked it, but I felt this is a step down from Baby Jane. And it almost felt like, let's try to recapture that lightning in a bottle again. And that is so hard to do. And I've been saying it in the past. I'll say it in the future. I'll probably say it till whenever I'm in an actual graveyard. It's impossible to recapture lightning in a bottle. It really is. And of course, the idea was that Robert Aldrich's film, I believe 5 for Texas, which came out before this and came out in between Baby Jane and this movie. That movie flopped. That movie, of course, it has a very young, voluptuous Ursula Andress in it. It has a lot of people that are in Baby Jane. Victor Buono is in the movie as well. That movie flopped, and they were like, let's go back to the well. Baby Jane was a huge hit. Baby Jane made a lot of money. Baby Jane turned a lot of heads and reamped a lot of careers, let's be honest. Why don't we try to go back to that well? And the idea was, let's get Betty and Joan back together and we'll switch the roles. This time, we'll have Betty be more of the victim in the Charlotte character, and we'll have Joan be the kind of antagonist of the picture. Now, there's so much controversy behind the making of this movie and what happened, and we will get into that right now just because once we get into the movie, it'll be hard to kind of go back here. So I feel like we should preface the whole review of the movie by talking about the behind the scenes, the pre-production, because it was crazy. I mean, in show prep this week, I read so many interesting stories about the pre-production of this movie. It is not to be believed. So I'm excited to share it with you guys. So, like I was saying, Aldrich, Crawford, Davis, they all signed back on. Now, obviously, we've been talking about it. They made a show called Feud about it, right? That Linda Lou was kind enough to point out. Bette Davis and Joan Crawford hated one another. And of course, there's a lot of conflicting stories as to why Joan Crawford doesn't feature as the lead antagonist in the final cut of this movie. She was replaced by Olivia de Havilland. Now, what happened was, now, again, the several stories. So I wasn't there. I wasn't alive. I don't know. I can choose to believe one of these stories. I don't know what to believe. It just seems like there's so many different fucking stories from so many different people that were there. So it's hard for me to really pick one and be like, okay, that's what happened. I don't know. The first one, the most popular one, is that Joan Crawford was dealing with a horrible illness Whether that was a kayfabe illness or not, I don't know. Now, she was in the hospital for like 5 weeks, apparently. And, they were trying to start production. She got out. There was this story where she got to the set and they gave her a standing ovation. They handed her flowers and bouquets and drinks. And the whole production just got up to clap for Joan Crawford. Like, Joan's here. Joan's ready to work. Let's fucking make a kick-ass movie. Let's do better than Baby Jane. That was the mentality. Let's one-up this son of a bitch and make an even better movie. 2 days into the filming, there's this big dispute during the dinner table scene, which is probably the best scene in the entire movie when you watch the final scene in the film, where Joan Crawford apparently stormed off the set. No one knows as to why. Some people say that Bette Davis was bossing around Robert Aldrich too much. Others said that Bette tried to get Joan Crawford's dialogue cut to very minimal into that scene. No one knows. Maybe just Joan had enough with Bette. She stormed off into the dressing room. Someone knocked on the door and she said, "I'm having a hard time breathing. Come back some other time." Halted production, and then they pretty much had no other choice but to go with another actress because she just wasn't in it. Now, I don't know if it was her hatred for Bette. Probably a lot of people are going to speculate that. Was she really sick? It's possible she could have been really sick. I don't know. This woman it's not like she was around terribly much longer. Joan Crawford dies in 1977. Her acting career really dies after Baby Jane. I mean, she did a lot of bad, and I love bad horror movies, but she did a lot of bad. The Trog, or Dr. Trog, whatever it was fucking called, from 1970 something. That's a horrible movie. Like, she did some really, really bad lower budget movies towards the end of her life, and you could tell she wasn't 100%. So maybe she really was sick. Maybe this was the beginning of the end of her life, really, when you think about it. So that, I think that's totally valid too. Now, I know a lot of people are going to probably stick their nose up at that, but it's a definite possibility. I don't know. I've heard stories that Aldrich then confronted Bette Davis and said, "Hey, what the hell do we do? Who should we get?" And he initially said, "Let's get Barbara Stanwyck." And of course, he reached out to Barbara Stanwyck. Barbara Stanwyck said, "Out of respect for Joan, I can't do that to Joan. I can't do it." So she shot it down. The next thing was, let's get Vivien Leigh. And of course, Vivien Leigh of Streetcar Named Desire and Gone with the Wind, and I think, one of the best actresses of that era. Whether she was crazy in real life or not, it remains to be seen, but she was just so great. I remember my grandmother always said that Vivien Leigh was the only Scarlett O'Hara. There was nobody else in the world that could have played that role. And that's the biggest reason why you can't remake Gone with the Wind. As great as a scope and a spectacle and the direction, and Clark Gable and Olivia de Havilland and so many great, great performances and scenes in that movie, she said the biggest reason you cannot is because Vivien Leigh is no longer with us. There was one time, place, and person to play the role of Scarlett O'Hara, and it was, of course, Vivien Leigh at that time. They reached out to Vivien Leigh. Vivien Leigh said, "I couldn't wake up in the morning and look at and bear to stand Joan Crawford, let alone Bette Davis." So she buried both of them. Apparently, Vivien Leigh didn't like either one of them. So she said, "Hell no, I'm not dealing with either one of those prima donnas. I don't want any part of this." And it wasn't until Bette Davis said, "Robert, why don't we get Livy?" in reference to Olivia de Havilland. Now, Robert Aldrich was like, "Olivia de Havilland, I don't think she'd do a movie like this." And she was like, well, we got to find out. So why don't you try to go and talk to her? Robert Aldrich, the director, this was a chunky man. He was no skinny guy. Like, I fucking love Robert Aldrich, man. Like, that's my goal, is when I'm like 50 to be like Robert Aldrich, making films as good as this. And, holly and jolly like he was. He fucking takes 3 planes, a train, and a taxi cab up a fucking goat path in the middle of the mountains in Switzerland to find Olivia de Havilland's house. He knocks on the door, gets there. "Olivia, my name's Robert Aldrich. I just directed Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. We would love for you to come and play the antagonist in Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte. I have a script. Can I please sit down? I've been on fucking planes and trains and automobiles for the past few days. I'm tired. I'm beat. Please, would you consider being in this movie?" Olivia de Havilland did not like the script. And she has admitted, even after doing the film, that to her dying day, which was only a few years ago, she lived to be 104, Olivia de Havilland. So rest in pepperonis. She was like, "I don't like the script then. I didn't like the script now." She didn't like it. It took him 4 days to convince her, "Please come back to the States with me. Make this movie as a favor to Bette." And she said, "You know what? For Bette, I'll do it." So Olivia de Havilland flew in, and to me, that is the absolute key to this movie. Is Olivia de Havilland. This is a great movie. I love Bette Davis, and Miss C said it herself. It's very hard to outshine a Bette Davis. But if there's anybody that could do it, man, it's Olivia de Havilland. It's a pro like Olivia de Havilland. What a fucking performance she gives in this movie. One of my all-time favorite performances. Like, if you're telling me, Grana, give me a top 10 acting performance from an actress of all time, Olivia de Havilland in Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte is absolutely towards the top of that list. She is so evil and menacing in this movie, but I think to a degree, she's the anchor of the picture because every single other person in this movie goes way over the top. This is everyone has the Southern accents. You have Joseph Cotton, who was a great, great character actor. You have Bette Davis going very over the top. You have George Kennedy in an early role. You have Bruce Dern. Very young Bruce Dern. Before, I always know Bruce Dern is an old man, but Bruce Dern is in this as the young, charming guy that has a wife and is married and has kids, but he also loves Bette Davis. Victor Buono plays the evil, overprotective father in the movie. There's so many. Agnes Moorehead as the caretaker, and she has this very, over-the-top accent. Everybody is dialed up to, 20 over the top, but Olivia grounds all of them. Everybody's up here. Olivia takes the picture and just grounds it, and she controls this movie like a chess game. It's so great to watch. She's almost methodical in this role. It reminds me of Terry Gilliam, what Terry Gilliam always said about working on Fisher King with Rob Williams and Jeff Bridges. He said that me and Robin were up here, whereas Jeff grounded us. And that's how you find that perfect medium in a movie like Fisher King works on not just a comedy level, a comedic level, but also on a dramatic element. That movie is really, really well rounded when you're playing with the subgenres of the things that are featured throughout it. I loved that. I thought that was really, really cool, that he said that. And I really feel that way with Olivia de Havilland here. Olivia wasn't into horror. You could tell. And in her interviews, I respect what she had to say. She's not a fan of the genre. I totally respect that. But as a fan, bro, I am on cloud 9 that she does this movie, and she is as good in it as she is. So let's get into the movie itself. I'm sorry, there's so much pre-production there. I'll get to comments first, just because obviously once I get into the movie, there's going to be no stopping me. So let's get into the comments first. I'm so sorry. The pre-production of that movie is just too interesting not to share. Feud is really good. I've heard that. I've really, really got to see it. I'm doing myself a great disservice. Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte is definitely a murder movie because we wonder, did her character really kill her boyfriend? My dad was saying that. He said that it's a great whodunit and a drama, and it's not a horror picture. And I'm like, man, especially upon a rewatch. Now, it is a whodunit. It is a drama picture. It has these elements, but this is a horror movie, in my opinion, too. Like, if you watch some of the sequences of horror and how Aldrich directs them, I mean, you can't tell me David Lynch didn't take some things from this movie. Like we'll get into it, but man, it's really great. Hush Hush is a 9 out of 10 for me. I'll spoil my rate. It's a 10. I think this is a 10 picture. I really, really, really love this movie. Many people who grew up in the 90s when they heard the title The Nanny, they probably thought, it's funny. I was in the office today, and someone said, "Oh, what movies are you reviewing tonight?" And I said The Nat, and they were like, "Is that the one with Fran Drescher?" I said, No, it's not. It's a lot different tonally than the one with Fran Drescher. They should remake it with Fran Drescher. That would be funny. Oh, he drowned. Nice Charlotte is my number one of these three, and with Baby as a close second. Charlotte was just so much darker and devious and intricate with the gaslighting and dark cinematography. 10 out of 10 for me too. Oh man, I'm close to being, if this is my number one of the three too. It's so close. Like, this and Baby Jane couldn't be closer to me. Like, I've rewatched Baby Jane to death. This is a movie I had only seen the one time years ago. And man, I was blown away watching it now. Like, I watched it, I was really small. You're talking 10, 11, 12-ish, So rewatching it through the eyes of a 27-year-old, I was like, this is fucking so good, man. It could have been 15-year layoff between times of seeing this movie, and it really did wonders. I felt like Olivia played me in a way because for the better part of the movie, she was trying to help Charlotte. Okay, so you saw that's interesting. Betty's daughter talked about the nanny halting production because Betty had the flu. She wanted an old-style nanny costume for the movie, and she wasn't getting it. They gave in, and her flu was gone. Oh, okay. So I didn't know that. I did not know that story. That's very interesting. Now, cool thing, Bette Davis' daughter, if you're wondering what she looks like, she happens to be in the movie we'll be covering last, Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. The across the street, or I guess next door neighbor to Blanche and Baby Jane is Bette Davis's real daughter. That's her on the couch where she's making fun. She's like, "Oh, her fat sister. That's Bette Davis's real life daughter." So pretty cool that she's in Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. She kind of got to be in that movie in a small like kind of cameo role. But let's do Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte, and I think I did the brief plot synopsis already. Forgive me if I didn't. So, but I think I did. So the way this movie opens to me is the perfect hook. Like to me, if you're in like film class and you want to study how to hook someone in and how to open a film, not just a horror film, but any film, I say you watch the opening of this movie, study the opening of this movie because it's absolutely masterful. We open with Bruce Dern and Victor Buono, who was, of course, nominated for an Oscar in Baby Jane as the larger than life piano player. He's playing Baby Jane. He's playing Charlotte's dad, of course, and Bruce Dern is this young guy who has fallen in love with her, but the catch is he has a wife and kids. He's already married. He shouldn't be barking up that tree, for lack of a better term. And Victor Buono kind of threatens him. He's like, listen, if you don't get away, if you don't break up with her tonight at this party, I'll kill you. He doesn't say that exactly, as black and white in that, but he implies it heavily. I will fucking kill you if you don't break up with her tonight. And we get this scene of the party, and we get a lot of different characters introduced and a lot of different perspectives. And through, one way or the other, we see that this guy, Bruce Dern, gets murdered. He breaks up with Charlotte and she cries and "I could kill you" and runs out of the room. And then, of course, the next thing we see, his head is taken off. He's decapitated and his hand is taken off and a ton of blood. And then, of course, Charlotte walks in with all this blood on her dress. She finds his body and Victor Buono kind of consoles her, and everybody at the party kind of stops and watches what they're doing. We then fast forward to present day where Charlotte is still living in the mansion 37 years later. And you could tell she's kind of the crazy woman that's off her rocker. She has this music box that she holds tightly to her. And these kids in the neighborhood kind of dare each other. Go in the house. Go in the house. She's crazy. Charlotte, she's nuts. And these kids go into the house and kind of one of them sees her and he runs out. They run away. And we get the opening credits. Like, you have hooked me beyond, like, I'm not going, if I got to pee, it's wait until after the fact. If I wanted popcorn, a snack, or a drink, or, emergency call, it has to wait. Because that's how you hook somebody in to watch a great movie. It's a perfect opening. I love the opening. It's just tremendous. Of course, the movie kind of goes on where they're forcing Charlotte to sell her home. We do get a performance from George Kennedy. Now, horror fans will remember him as the shop owner in Creepshow 2 and Old Chief Woodenhead. That's George Kennedy. Of course, I remember from movies like Charade, and I just love George Kennedy. He's great. He always usually played a villain, but he's one of the guys working on the construction crew, and she takes a shot at him, and he's like, "God damn it, she took a shot at me." And she's like, "If I wanted to kill you, I could have. If I wanted to hit you, I would have." It's just great. I love how that opened. And then, of course, he goes to the town sheriff, and they want her to leave the house, and they give her an eviction notice. And of course, who but a long lost relative would come into town, but Olivia de Havilland's character, who, I mean, like I was saying before, Miriam Deering, it's just one of her best roles. To me, it's one of her best roles. And I'm a big de Havilland fan. Like, that's another person I'd love to spotlight. The Snake Pit. Like, when it comes to asylum movies, like mental asylum movies, The Snake Pit's the all-time greatest to me. That's my favorite mental asylum movie, is her in The Snake Pit. And she was robbed of the Oscar. She absolutely should have won for The Snake Pit. But thankfully, she won 2 other Oscars. And I always loved her in Gone with the Wind. I remember saying to my grandmother, I said, when we saw Gone with the Wind, I said, "Hey, that Olivia de Havilland, what else has she done?" And she showed me the Errol Flynn pictures that she did. And I always was a big Olivia de Havilland fan. So I was like a kid in Christmas to see her in this movie. I was like, holy shit. Like, no disrespect to Joan Crawford, but to me, there's like, Joan Crawford's no Olivia de Havilland. It's just no comparison. Olivia is just one of the greats. It could be 1B behind Bette Davis's 1A. That's how good Olivia de Havilland is. She kind of comes into town, and we see slowly but surely that Bette Davis's character seems to be losing her grip with reality. She's depressed that the home is going to be sold. There's a great scene where her, Joseph Cotton, and Olivia are all around the table, and they're discussing the foreclosure of the house. And Bette Davis is like, I invited you over here to help. And Olivia de Havilland's like, well, I'm going to help you. I'm going to help you sell the house. And Bette Davis just snaps. And as the line of the movie, she goes, what do you think I invited you over here for? Company? Like, that's my favorite line in all three of these movies. It's so funny. Like, her fucking amazing. Like, I invited you over here to help me save the house, not to sell it, you fucking bitch. Like, you think I invited you over for company? Like, all week, me and my pops, we've been going back and forth. And I'm like, honey, what do you think you're here for? Company? Like, just, great line. I loved how that was delivered. And then, of course, the movie kind of plays out. We get Agnes Moorehead as the kind of caretaker, so similar to the Elvira character in Baby Jane. Agnes Moorehead's a lot of fun in this, very over the top. You may remember her from Bewitched. I always remember from The Twilight Zone. She was in the Invaders episode where she doesn't have any dialogue, and she didn't want to do it because her gimmick was to go over the top. Agnes Moorehead is super over the top in this movie. Well, now they're going to see your dark side of your face now, the true side of your face. I'm going to go down to the sheriff and tell him everything. She's like chewing up scenery and got an Oscar nomination, which is really cool. And everyone is really doing that. Joseph Cotton is super over the top as this kind of doctor character who seems to be wooing Olivia de Havilland. We don't quite know what's going on. And a lot of this movie plays out in sequences of horror. And they're not only good sequences of horror, to me, they're great. As Bette Davis has these interesting dream sequences where she's getting the dream marriage of marrying Bruce Dern's character, and it's this beautiful white room, but it's very oversaturated white, so it just feels like a dream. And Betty kind of walks this straight line, and everybody's face is like white and blank, just like George Romero's Bruiser, which reminded me of that film. It was like they're all wearing the Bruiser mask. As she kind of walks up to Bruce Dern and they're getting married and she's on cloud nine, and then she wakes up like, there are times where she'll have these dreams where there's, noises in the house and ghosts and things like that. And a dead man walking around with dirt and blood all over him. And she's trying to snap out of it. And for a while, they're playing the whole charade of, is she really going crazy, or is something forcing her to go this crazy? And of course, it is the latter. We get the whole revelation that Olivia de Havilland and Joseph Cotton are working in cahoots behind this. And of course, you have the whole whodunit angle of, was it her that killed Bruce Dern all these years ago? The answer is no, that it was Bruce Dern's wife. And she's been blackmailing Bruce Dern's wife for all these years, Olivia de Havilland, because she saw her go out of the barn. And then, of course, the whole idea is, let's drive Charlotte insane and we'll inherit her fortune. We'll inherit this mansion. We'll sell it, and then we'll get all this money back. So really devious plan. And the whole idea is that let's drive her crazy. They have this scene where they kind of trick her into shooting blanks at Joseph Cotton, who's pretending to be the Bruce Dern character, and really disturbing scenes once Olivia de Havilland snaps. Right? Because like I said, she's the rock. She's the anchor. The entire picture, whenever they're driving to drop off the dead body, she kind of snaps at her. She's like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? She smacks the dog shit out of Bette Davis. She's like, shut up and grab the body with me. And they throw it into the water. I mean, really scary. I was like, holy crap. Like, to see Olivia go there and have that fucking, range, I thought was really something else. I was like really impressed by that. And it all kind of culminates to me to one of the more effective usages of music in film. And obviously, everyone knows I'm a big music and film guy. I love the lullaby score in Suspiria. I love, using I did it with my own short. Down by the Bay is literally a song. It's a little nursery song. Now, I don't know if this was a little nursery song, but it's such a haunting little song, and hence where the movie gets its title from, of Hush, Hush, Sweet Charlotte. They're giving Bette Davis these like drugs to kind of get her to be out of it and delirious and shit like that. And they decide to try to sound like ghosts. Charlotte, Charlotte. They're calling her throughout all sorts of hallways in the house as she's kind of in and out of consciousness to get her to think, oh my God, am I seeing ghosts? Am I hearing ghosts? And Joseph Cotton takes a sit on the piano and they sings the song Hush, Hush, Sweet Charlotte. And it's so creepy, man. Like, every time I hear this song, I get the lyrics up. I guess I get the lyrics up and give you a verse or two. Why the hell not? Hush, Hush, Sweet Charlotte lyrics, because it's just so freaking creepy. I think it's just so damn good. So hush, hush, sweet Charlotte, don't you cry. Hush, hush, sweet Charlotte, I'll love you till I die. You weep because you had a dream last night. You dreamed that I said goodbye. So creepy. As Joseph Cotton is singing this in a creepy way, but he's also, it looks like he's having a grand old time. Like we're psychologically fucking somebody up for life right here. Let's sing, let's dance around the piano, gather around, everybody. It's, oh my God, such a creepy little song as Bette Davis is like trying to get out of the bed and she's like, what the fuck? Great. To me, that's just horror at its absolute finest. I love that Robert Aldrich integrated that into the picture. It's Hush, Hush, Sweet Charlotte is not just a title. It's possibly the best sequence in the entire movie where they're singing the song around the piano and trying to get her to go crazy. And then, of course, along the way, there are some deaths. Agnes Moorehead says she's going to go expose Olivia de Havilland once she finds out that she's been drugging Bette Davis, and Olivia de Havilland throws her down the steps, Psycho style. You have the scene where Olivia de Havilland's admitting everything to Joseph Cotton, and they're like, we're going to live happily ever after. And they think they have Betty sedated, and they kind of hug, and Betty hears the whole confession. And she pushes this flower pot onto them, and they crashes, and they both die. Crazy, like just absolutely really wild. I did forget to mention you do have Cecil Kellaway in the movie, who is another Twilight Zone character actor that I always remembered. He's in Elegy, the episode. He's like this really interesting kind of side character in the movie who, he's interested in the case from 30 something years ago, and he finds some clues along the way. He talks to the late wife of the victim, and it's played by Mary Astor, who this was of course one of her last roles. She was like a huge, I think she was a big silent era film star. People were asking before about silent films. Mary Astor is great in this. It's really cool to see her in this small role, and she apparently loved the script. She was like, oh man, this is a really like important part, even though it's smaller. I would love to be a part of this. So she does a great job in it, and Cecil's good. I don't know. To me, I just always loved this movie, and the whole scene at the end when they're taking her away, and they play the song "Hush, Hush, Sweet Charlotte, I'll love you till I die." Just great as everybody's kind of watching. To me, not a sequel to Baby Jane, but a great spiritual successor. A movie that somehow, some way was able to capture some of, if not all, of that lightning in a bottle once again from Baby Jane. And Aldrich had a hiccup in between. Five for Texas is not a good film. I did see that movie years ago, and I did like it. I couldn't believe this is the same guy that did Baby Jane and Hush Hush. Like, how the hell did this happen? But again, you try different things. When you're a true artist, you really want to try different things. And maybe comedy wasn't his thing at that time, but he would go on years later to direct The Longest Yard, which is a great comedy. So, maybe he just wasn't, just whatever reason didn't work out. But a movie that does work out, and a movie that I consider a perfect horror film, it's none other than Hush, Hush, Sweet Charlotte from 1964. An absolute perfect horror movie, in my opinion, and one of my faves. Really, really love this movie. So highly recommend if you haven't seen this. So they shot half the movie with one actress and half with the other, or reshoot the entire movie. Okay, so I can explain that. Sorry, that's the part of some of the pre-production stuff. It's so crazy. So they shot, from what I understand, only a handful of days where Joan Crawford didn't claim illness. And again, that could be legit. She could have been sick. I don't know. Now, again, only a few days. So I think from what I read, there is one scene where Joan Crawford is in the movie, but you obviously would never know because it's a wide shot of somebody sitting in a taxi. But apparently there's a wide shot of somebody getting out of the taxi, and it was Joan Crawford sitting in the taxi. But granted, you would never fucking know that if it could easily be Olivia de Havilland, someone lied. Like, you would never know. But I will say this. I heard conflicting stories. I forgot to tell us one. Bruce Davison tells the story, and there's a Gilbert Gottfried podcast where Bruce Davison was on with Gilbert Gottfried, may he rest in peace. So many people that are gone, geez. Where he told the story of what he remembered happening. He said that Olivia and Joan awkwardly met on the set, and she was like, Olivia, what are you doing here? And apparently Betty said, you're fired. And she called Joan Crawford the C word. I don't like that word. I won't say it on the show unless I really, really hate something. It's just a negative word. I don't know. Unless I'm trying to be really negative, I don't want to say that word. She called her. She said, you're fired, C word. And Joan was like, what? And then apparently, they informed her, you're fired, get off the set. And that's a story that Bruce Davison tells. I don't know if I believe that, because there's a huge story that Joan Crawford didn't find out until it was heard on the radio, because once Bette Davis heard Olivia de Havilland was fired, Robert Aldrich called her and said, hey, we're going to sign Olivia on. She's going to do it. I'm going to come back on 3 planes and train and a fucking taxi cab down a goat path. We're going to, legally inform Joan that she's been fired. And Betty said, oh, okay, great. Immediately, Bette Davis, being Bette Davis, called her agent and said, oh, they fired Joan. They fired the bitch. And the story was public within an hour, and Robert Aldrich didn't realize that he got back to the States. And I'm very sorry, Joan. We wanted to legally inform you. Fucking Betty didn't do that. So it is what it is. But I just thought that sounds more like what happened to me. I believe that story more. I don't know. The whole Bruce Day, like the fact they were both on set and she had no idea that Olivia was casted. Like, it just sounds too fictional to me. I don't believe that story. I really don't. But who knows? And then apparently Bruce Davison was like, hell yeah, you stood up for yourself. But I don't know if I believe that story. I really don't. Not Bruce Davison, Bruce Dern. Sorry. I got my Bruce's confused. The way these movies were done in black and white, cinematography is also so amazing. Yes. I would say from a technical, this movie is so much better than Baby Jane. Like, you could see how much more money went into this and how much more time they had in the editing room and how much more time they had with lighting. Like, people don't realize Baby Jane was a rushed production. Like, Baby Jane, Bette Davis always said Baby Jane was like edited in camera. Like, she said that there was no time. Like, they rushed to get that movie out and it became a monster hit. This movie, obviously, they got more money, especially when Olivia de Havilland signed on. It wasn't nearly as big of a hit, hence why there probably wasn't another movie like it. I believe it was made for like 3.9-ish million and it grossed like a little over 4. So it made like $1 million profit, whereas Baby Jane was made for under $1 million and made almost 10 million. So it was a huge hit, bang for its buck. This wasn't as big of a hit, but it was a hit. Critically, people liked it. George Kennedy was also in the airport disaster movies, which were later spoofed in the movie Airplane. Absolutely. Charlotte was damaged and traumatized, and people like that are easy prey. Miriam was the perfect predator in her quiet ease of gaslighting those vulnerabilities. Agnes was the quiet observer. Yeah, see, that's a great way to put it. Granted, Agnes wasn't so quiet though. Like, Agnes could be pretty freaking crazy, man, in this movie. Agnes Moorehead. But yes, that's totally true. Okay, I got it from your review. Joan Crawford was like Eric Stoltz in back. Yes, exactly. It was only a couple of days at most. That's from what I've read. There was only like 1 or 2 days in the entire time she was there that she didn't claim I'm sick or I don't feel well, it is a shame, because you see where Joan's career went after this, and like maybe this would have been a big role for her, because obviously she's more victim throughout most of Baby Jane until we get to the ending. But here it would have been interesting to see Joan play an antagonist. I think that would have really, really helped her career and moving forward. But selfishly, I'm happy they got Olivia de Havilland. I mean, she's just so much better. Absolutely Rusty. I suppose some people could disagree, but I see the movie as elderly abuse. That's interesting. I didn't quite look at it that way. I looked at it as more like just mental abuse, and not the elderly part, I guess. She knew what she was up to, but had no power against Miriam, the fine lady, and only an ally to Nutcase. It was the perfect psychological triangle. Miriam was one of the most quiet, evil characters ever. Yes, exactly. And that's what I liked about it. Like, again, she could have easily been like, ha ha ha, we'll get it all, Charlotte. But she's so cold. She was so cold in the movie. Like, I thought that was the best part about it. One of the classic movies that was definitely not a sequel, but it was originally made to be a sequel, was Mr. Deeds Goes to Town, was the sequel to the classic Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. I love both those movies. Love big Jimmy Stewart guy for Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. I also heard Betty wanted to be paid a ridiculous salary, so Aldrich offered to make her a silent executive producer just so she could criticize and reduce Joan to the point of quitting. I've heard that too. That's another story. Like, apparently when Joan Crawford heard she was a producer, that's when Joan Crawford claims he was sick. There's like literally, if you look hard enough, you could probably find like 10s of 20s of stories as to why Joan Crawford doesn't do this movie. I do believe that it may have been, either the illness or it was just, I can't do this. I can't work with Betty again. It could have easily been either one of those two. I think those are the most logical explanations, but to drag and not just quit was really weird. So that makes me think maybe she was really sick and maybe she really did want to do it. But Also, the whole to kind of throw Bruce Dern's story away. There's a story where they talked on the phone like very shortly before Joan Crawford's passing. Joan Crawford had called Bette Davis, and Bette Davis, of course, went on about herself. Like Joan Crawford said that she didn't say I had any talent or credit me for Baby Jane, and that was the last conversation they had. So I don't think that phone conversation happens if Betty got you fired off of Hush Hush and called you the C word on set in front of everybody. Like I just don't buy that story. It sounds cool. If it's true, that's amazing, but I don't think that's what happened. I guess Joan could be very insecure as an actress. It's a shame. None of these people are here now to ask. Like, I don't know. But it is what it is. Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte, though, one of the all-time greats. I love this movie. One of my favorite 60s horror movies. One of my favorite horror movies, period. A truly great movie. But in working backwards, we now get to the movie that came out first. And for most people is going to be first on their list. Now, like I said, it is close for me now. It would have, like if you had asked me a week ago here on Thursday when I was doing Soul Survivors review or rant, if you will, I would have told you Baby Jane was the better movie outright. Now I'm so close. Like that's how much Hush Hush has grown on me. But this next movie here is really the movie that made me an all-time Bette Davis fan and a movie that I think saved her career at a time. Now, I know their careers, both she and her co-star Joan Crawford, their careers were diminishing, for lack of a better term. They were kind of moving downhill, and they both were in desperate need of a hit and to be relevant again and to be seen and wanted again. And of course, they teamed up with Robert Aldrich in a small budget, and this was a little movie that could, from the year 1962, Whatever Happened to Baby Jane? Yes, Whatever Happened to Baby Jane? Brief plot synopsis. A former child star torments her paraplegic sister in their decaying Hollywood mansion. Yes, Whatever Happened to Baby Jane? Now, ever since the first time I saw this movie, I was like, that's a great movie. Like it's just one of those, it demands like your approval. It demands your, critical analysis of saying, this is a fucking great movie. And it really, really is. And I think that why this movie's legacy is so great, even now, even 62 years later, as we talk about it live on Granny's Graveyard tonight, is because it reflected in a way where their careers were at the time. Here were two actresses that were holier than now at a time. Of course, Bette Davis, multi-time Oscar winner. Joan Crawford. Did Joan Crawford win an Oscar? Someone can check me on that. I'm sorry. I forget if Joan Crawford may have been nominated, but I don't know if she ever won an Oscar. But, whatever. Both big stars, both really big stars in their day. And of course, like everybody else, when you get older, you start to become undesired. You start to become unwanted. You're not as bright of a shining star as you once were. And here were two very hungry actresses that wanted to prove that they still had it. And not only that they still had it, but that they never goddamn lost it, baby. And hence, Whatever Happened to Baby Jane? Of course, it tells the story of Baby Jane Hudson as a girl, and it's like the 1917-ish. And she's like this big like vaudevillain star, and she's on stage. I always, when I was a kid, Shirley Temple was like I always remember seeing the VHS tapes of Shirley Temple. Like she was a big child star and then just didn't translate when it became to adult acting. She did adult acting, but she wasn't as big a star. That's how I always looked at Baby Jane, obviously without the fucking mental insanity. If you want to look even closer to mental insanity, look at, and it kills me to say this because this is more my childhood. Look at Amanda Bynes. Amanda Bynes was the biggest rising star of that time, had so much talent, was so funny, was so likable and pretty, and just, I thought she was going to be one of the biggest things ever. I was like, Amanda Bynes, a megastar. And you look at Amanda Bynes now, man, you cry. You'll cry if you see videos or pictures of Amanda. It is so sad, and I hope that nothing but the best for her because she was a great talent, and I do think that the business drove her fucking crazy. I really do. It's a style. It's a child star like that. It seems like the future is so bright. She's got the golden blonde hair, the pretty smile. She sings songs on stage in front of crowds, and her dad plays the songs on the piano and takes requests from the audience. What would you like? I've written a letter to Daddy, and she sings the song. I've written a letter to Daddy. His address is heaven above. Doo-doo-doo. And that song, that kind of like score, plays throughout the whole film, the whole written a letter to Daddy thing. We see this kid is just bigger than life. And of course, who is behind the scenes but her sister, Blanche Hudson, who is the, at that time, undesired of the two, the one that's not in the spotlight, the one that is neglected by her father, but is told by her mother, maybe one day you'll be a bigger star than Jane ever was. I just hope when that day comes, when and if that day comes, that you're nicer to your sister than she and your father are to you right now. And Blanche, with tears in her eyes, says, I will, you bet I will. And like says it with some anger and some pent up emotion. We fast forward to a few years down the road after that, where the roles have been reversed now. Of course, Blanche has become the silver screen star, and we see these great old footage of Joan Crawford when she was younger, and beautiful. And I've heard a lot of stories of Joan Crawford that she slept around to get the parts that she got. I believe those are true from what I understand. But again, she was a beautiful lady in her youth. And you see these older films for real. They're actually taken from pictures that she had done, which I liked that. Again, nowadays it would be, let's de-CGI age them. No, like, go to the past. Like, this was a big movie star in the past. Show that. And I liked that they did that. A little touch that I really, really appreciate in a movie that's 62 years old, did it better than a movie today would. And I thought that was really good. Of course, she's become this big star. And then baby Jane Hudson, Bette Davis's character, was a flop trying to make it into the mainstream world. She made pictures that didn't get released in the United States. She had people tell her, oh, you were great in this. It was such a shame it didn't get a wide release. Like, she just, every single chance that she got didn't work for whatever reason or another. It was sometimes her. It was sometimes a bad filmmaker. It was sometimes a combination. It was sometimes people didn't care. For whatever reason, she just didn't make it as an adult. And that happens to a lot of child stars. I mean, look at a lot of them. Macaulay Culkin wasn't as big as an adult actor as he was as a kid. He just wasn't. And then some of them supersede it. Some of them are better as adult actors. Look at Elijah Wood. I think Elijah Wood is so much better now than he was as a kid. There's just, you could sit down and look at a lot of these, actors or actresses that make it or don't from when you're a child star. And I think that's a big underlying theme of this movie, is the horrors of the Hollywood world, the horrors of being forced into stardom by your parents, and what that could do to you, how it can turn a innocent little girl into just this evil, maniacal little brat that demands and screams and will bang her little head on the ground if she doesn't get her ice cream in time. And then, of course, from the other sister's perspective, you have that animosity that's there. I'm good. I'm the good child. I'm not bratty. I don't complain. I don't whine. But here I don't get anything that I want either. To me, that's a big, big part of the backstory of this movie. And then, of course, we get this very interesting sequence where, the two sisters are leaving a party. They're driving in the car. And then, of course, one goes to open the gate. It's shot very like whodunit-esque. We don't see the body. We see the bodies, not the faces. And we see the car crash into the gate, and you hear some screaming, and then we get the opening credits. Whatever happened to baby Jane? And we get what is going on? And we fast forward years and years later. Both of the sisters are now old. They're in a mansion, and that's where we get the bulk of the film, where it's Bette Davis and Joan Crawford. They're elderly now. They're living in a mansion. Joan Crawford is crippled from the waist down because of this accident, and we're led to believe that Bette Davis drove the car into her out of jealousy and rage that her sister had become a big movie star in adult life and Bette Davis had not. That's what we're led to believe for most of the film. Now, obviously, that's not really what happened. We find out, whatever happened. We find out whatever happened towards the end of the picture. But the movie plays out where, I mean, you just have some of the best acting you'll ever see in a picture. I mean, it's just great. And Betty, this is Betty's finest hour to me. And she should have won the third Oscar here. Like Miss C was saying, she absolutely should have won the Oscar for this. And she was robbed. I like The Miracle Worker. I like that movie, but ain't no goddamn way. No way. Bette Davis in this movie is just untouchable. Unhinged, like Miss C said. Unhinged. Just electric in this movie. as this woman who struggles with not only the failed stardom, but the alcoholism that has consumed her life. And, she'll have people from across the way. Hey, we were watching, your sister was on, one of the old pictures, and we just wanted to give her these flowers. We hope she's doing well. And just so cold. Just thanks. Bye. Closes the door on the lady and starts drinking vodka. Like, she's just such a bitch character. And Joan, sits upstairs in her room in her wheelchair, and she watches these old movies and critiques them. Oh, I wish the director had held on that shot a little longer. Oh, I could have been better here. I could have done this a little bit better. I love that. To me, when you see, it's almost like actors breaking kayfabe. Like, I love to see actors playing former actors. I thought that was really cool. Like, I always like New Nightmare. Like, that's a big thing here, where it's like, you see their former selves on, the television, and they're like, oh, I wish this, and this. I thought that was really cool. I liked that. That to me felt like a big, like, breaking kayfabe in the movie. And I thought that was good. And then, of course, throughout the movie, things in tension just start to escalate. And Bette Davis really starts to not only emotionally torture Joan Crawford, but physically torture her. And there's a lot of great gags in the movie where, Bette Davis unhooks the telephone so Joan Crawford can't call for help. Joan Crawford, being a paraplegic, she crawls down the steps with all her upper body strength, gets there, and Bette Davis shows up and just starts kicking the shit out of her. She's like, "What? You got out of your bed, huh? You got out of your chair?" Starts kicking the hell out of her and is dragging her body. Really disturbing. There are scenes where, hey, Blanche, you didn't eat your din. I brought you some lunch, though. And she takes the cover off, and it's a dead rat or it's a dead bird. And Joan Crawford, oh, God. And she's being starved and shit. And there'll be points where she tries to sneak out of the room just to get food. Like, that's how kind of crazy Bette Davis's character is. And throughout the picture also, Bette Davis is trying to, in her mind, make that comeback. She wants to be wanted again. She wants to be that little girl that opened up the stage and sang, "I've written a letter to Daddy," that we meet in the beginning of the picture. And she really yearns for that. That's what she wants, oh so much. And she goes to post offices. She'll go around the town and she'll go, "I'm baby Jane Hudson. You may remember me." "No, ma'am, I don't remember you." No, don't remember you. It eats her alive that she is not remembered as this great child star. She wants to, even to be a has-been would be big for her. She feels like she was and never was because nobody remembers her. It's like you've just become not only yesterday's news, you're not even news at all now. You've been lost in the shuffle. And like that to her is a horrific thing. She does meet this larger-than-life piano player played by Victor Bruno, who he did get an Oscar nomination for this, rightfully so. He was such a good character actor in this movie. I thought he was absolutely great in this. I loved his addition to the movie. As this guy she hires to play the piano for her as she tries to be a performer again. And there's just haunting scene again by the piano. I guess Robert Aldrich was the master of playing creepy scenes by the piano, where he plays "I've written a letter to Daddy." And at the beginning of the movie, it was so sweet. It was so cute. It was a kid performing in front of everyone, and it was a nice sight to see. Now we see this old, decrepit, sad Bette Davis with this over the top, marionette-esque makeup where she's more dolled up than Betty Boop, and she has all this bad makeup on. She literally looks like a scarecrow, and she's still doing the same moves. "I've written a letter to Daddy saying I love you." So, like, one of the more haunting scenes you'll ever see, where you're like, like, I remember, like, my eyes bulging out of my head, like Bette Davis eyes, I guess, just being like, what the fuck, man? Like, this bitch is crazy. Like, so good. I love that stuff. And I don't know, I really appreciate that. I thought that those scenes were really good. And then, of course, certain sequences with Elvira. You have Elvira, who's the like taking care of Blanche, and one day she says, "Listen, Elvira, you're no longer needed here. I'm going to let you go." And the woman's like, "Oh, I just would like to hear from Miss Blanche." And, "Oh, well, she's asleep. You can't. I'll send you your last paycheck. Be on your way." Bette Davis gets in the car to go to town. Elvira sneaks back in, and Elvira finds Joan Crawford, and she's all chained up and gagged and emaciated and really like malnourished. And she's like, "Oh my God, Miss Blanche, oh my God." And Bette Davis out of nowhere pops up behind her with a hammer, just whammo, just boom, knocks her. Like, pretty crazy. I mean, for 1962, this got some violent parts in it. So does Hush Hush. Definitely got violent where other 60s movies, and even it probably going more backdate to the 50s, wouldn't go this violent. 1950s cinema wouldn't go here. But this movie definitely was a era of time where the genre was transcending. It wasn't quite at the grindhouse exploitation era that you get or like a decade or so after this, but it's the beginnings of that. It's the beginnings of like violence in film, and I'm here for it. I thought that was a really interesting touch. Of course, at one point, Victor Bruno comes to collect his money. He's drunk. Bette Davis is drunk, and he finds Blanche is tied up and gagged and all this stuff. And his reaction, he's like, "Oh my God!" He runs out of there, and then she figures, "Hey, let's get out of here. The police are going to come knocking on the door. We got to go make a run for it." And you could sit down and talk about some of the greatest scenes in movie history, and you could sit down and talk about why you love movies and why you love going to the movies. One of, to me, the greatest scenes and greatest endings in cinema's history is here in Baby Jane, where she takes her sister to the beach. And she tells the story to Blanche. She goes, "Do you remember when Daddy and me, we would go to the beach, and I would rehearse and do my musical rehearsals, and all the people would crowd around me in the sand. It was so great to be watched. I felt like a star." And she tells her that little anecdote as they're sitting there on the beach. And sure enough, Blanche says, "Listen, I have something I need to tell you. I'm going to die. I'm hanging on for dear life here, but I'm going to die. But I need to tell you something. The murder, or I'm sorry, not the murder, but the accident that you were, blamed for my whole life, that you ran into me and crippled me and have been living with that guilt your whole life. You weren't driving that night. I was drunk, and I tried to run into you because you had made fun of me at the party. And I did this to myself." And she admits it begrudgingly, and she looks so sad about it. And Betty is so emotionally gone in that scene. Like, she's reverted all the way back, it feels like, to the little girl we meet at the beginning. And she has this great line where she says, "All this time we could have been friends." I love that delivery. Like, she just shakes her head like, "And all this time we could have been friends." And she goes, "How about it? I'll tell you what, I'll get us some ice cream." Like, the way it's immediately deflated to, "You want a strawberry? A big strawberry? I'll get 2 big strawberries." She goes up. The way, like, your entire lives have been the horrors of guilt, the horrors of jealousy, the horrors of not feeling desired anymore, and the hatred that you felt for one sister over the other, where this entire time it was just this big misunderstanding, and we could have been friends. We could have been friends the whole damn time. It's brilliant. It's such a brilliant, like, twist. I always thought that was such a great scene. Like, when she admits that, and then she comes back to her with the strawberries. The police notice it, and they go, hey, you know what? We're looking for your sister. And Betty's like kind of totally out of it, and she has the 2 ice creams. And she's like, "Oh, my sister. Oh, I'm just going to bring her some ice cream." And you see the cops run over. They spot Blanche. She's like kind of lying there. And for a moment, the people all circle around the commotion, because what do people do when a crazy event's happening? They stop to look. And it's for a minute where Betty looks around, and she's a kid again. She feels like she's totally reverted to childhood again. And she has the 2 ice creams, and she looks around, and she just starts to dance like the rehearsals when she was a kid. She's in that moment where she finally gets to relive her glory in her own mind, even though it's a sad sight of this crazy woman dancing around with 2 strawberry ice creams in the middle of the beach and her dead sister's lying off in the side. She's getting to relive her glory right then and there. She's finally achieved what she set out to do, and that is to be a kid again. And of course, to me, that wide shot is at the end. One of the best endings in movie history. I think it's so great. Like, I love that ending. To me, that always just struck a nerve. And I saw it actually in a movie theater for, I want to say it was, I think it's 60th anniversary. It would have been 2022. It was the 60th anniversary. I saw it in the movie theater, and seeing it in the big screen. I was the only one in the theater, by the way. 60th anniversary screening. I was the only person there. I couldn't believe it. And man, like that, just seeing that in the big screen even was so cool for me. Like, to me, one of the best endings ever. I just love it. To me, whatever happened to Baby Jane is a perfect example of a movie with tremendous acting that reflects the actresses and actors that are in it at the time. A great up-and-coming director, Robert Aldrich, who really proved that he could do a lot with not a lot of money. And then, of course, when given the budget, he makes a home run like Hush, Hush, Sweet Charlotte. You put Bette Davis on the map. You put, of course, her back in the Oscar nomination category. Joan Crawford was put back on the map. Everybody was kind of elevated, and this movie was a huge, huge hit. And you can see why. It's a great movie. It really is. Whatever happened to Baby Jane is just tremendous. It's a great movie. So let's get back to comments, though, as I've gone on for a while here. Sorry. Let's see. I think we were... I forget where the hell we were. I think we were here. Synth checks in. Synth, hey, all, interesting show topic. Graddy's Graver. Thank you so much, Synth. Hope all is well with you, buddy. Their careers were opposite. Betty played more villains, and so being a victim was a surprise to the audience. Joan played more heroines, victims, so her being a villain was a surprise when did one. Exactly, yes. The opening of the movie, where we are first introduced to the Hudson siblings as children, and Blanche is very envious. It makes you think that is going to continue throughout the movie. Yes, it does a very good job at playing with your expectations. And honestly, so do all three of these. I would say that's the biggest thing with all three of these play with your expectations. Like going in, I would think something different for all three of these movies. Like this poster to me looks very Giallo-esque. Like you have the little doll with the cracked head, which reminds me a lot of Deep Red. And then, of course, like the different colors, like the green, blue, and then that great tagline, Sister, Sister, oh so fair, why is there blood all over your hair? Great tagline. I love that. That would be a one sheet I'd be so interested in owning, but I couldn't imagine the price. Like, I'm actually not even brave enough to look up the price. If someone wants to look up the price of the Whatever Happened to Baby Jane original one sheet poster, feel free, because I can't imagine what it would cost. If it's cheap enough, I would totally throw it in the man cave. And of course, you have the song Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, which I believe she sang. I forget what the talk show was. I don't know if it was Carson or what talk show it was, but Bette Davis sang the song. Whatever happened to Baby Jane? She could laugh, she could sing, make the whole theater ring. She could do almost anything. Whatever happened to Baby Jane? Really catchy little song. Joan won an Oscar for Mildred Pierce. Okay, I thought so. I was going to say, I believe she's Oscar winner, but I didn't want to say that and then be like corrected. Went by Joan Crawford's old house on a recent Hollywood Homes tour, pretty basic ranch house. That's awesome, though. I'm jealous you got to do that. Joan Crawford won Best Actress for Oscar in Mildred Pierce. It's a good movie. I have never seen Mildred Pierce, so I'll have to take a look. I trust you guys, so I will totally have to take a look at that. I think that what makes these movies are the trailers, because long ago trailers were just made for the advertisement. They didn't give much of the movie away. Exactly. And you watch the trailer to this movie again, I would expect a much different movie than you got. Yeah, Amanda Bynes. It is. Man, you see Amanda Bynes now, I literally want to cry. Like, I really, really do. Like, I loved Amanda Bynes as a kid. I remember Big Fat Liar and The Amanda Show and Moody's Point. And, geez, I loved Amanda Bynes. All that. I hate the business. It's such a fucked up business. I've seen Baby Jane a lot of times. It's awesome, interesting, and scary, too. Yes, I've watched this movie to death. Like, that is the one thing, maybe why Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte felt so fresh to me. I've only seen it twice. Baby Jane I watch like every year. This is a movie I watch every fucking year. I love Baby Jane. It's just a classic. You wouldn't do these terrible things to me if I wasn't in this chair. But you are, Blanche. You are in that chair. I love that. I love that line, man. Great quote, though. Joan and Betty were able to make some pre-code films that are so controversial you almost can't believe they were allowed to make them back then. Like Joan and Rain and Betty and Human Bondage. Oh my God, Of Human Bondage is awesome. I had the VHS of that movie somewhere. I totally have it. That's wow. You know what? Next retro VHS night, since I busted out the VHS player last week, I'll have to watch Of Human Bondage. Davis had some great final appearances on the late night show with David Letterman. So much attitude. Yes, I always remember her on Dick Cavett, and she talked about like all the men she'd kissed in Hollywood, and she ranked them. It was so fucking funny. Like she just like, oh, he was a ghastly man. Like she was really like did not sugarcoat anything. That's why I love Bette Davis, and like you could see it in her acting. She just was real. She was the whole article. Hey, what's up, Grande Cinephile Sanity's in the Heezy. What's going on, Sean? Betty is so unhinged. She chews up and spits out scenery in glorious fashion. Totally. She's great in this. There was this movie, The Star, which Bette Davis also played a former celebrity who was so desperate for a comeback. I've never heard of that or seen it, so Another one to the watch list, my friend. That sounds awesome. I'd be curious if it was before or after Jane. Those two films are like karma for Bette. She gaslit Joan and baby, and then gets gaslit. Exactly. I think that's why they wanted Joan, because they were like, okay, you'll gaslight her in this one, and then I guess they just couldn't work it out. But fuck it, Olivia de Havilland was a much better choice. In the scene where Jane is remembering her childhood as she holds up her doll and then she looks in the mirror, you really feel her distraught. Yes, it's so true. That's a great scene. That scene just haunts me forever. Victor was so real in this. I've read a lot of stuff on side folks like him who do these things for stars, for the money, even knowing the actors are divas and crazy, but they say nothing to do it. Exactly. And they have this whole thing where he's living with his mother and you're my agent, and they put her on. It's a nice little levity in the movie. I thought it was kind of cute. I liked him and his mom. I thought that was kind of funny. The ending of the movie is a bit mysterious because we don't know whether Blanche has died or not. Yeah, exactly. That's true. I don't know. To me, it's just the whole spectacle of the wide shot of the beach on the water, and then Bette Davis just dancing with the ice cream as she's fully reverted now to her child star self. I thought that was really cool. Betty as Jane looks younger again compared to how she looks throughout the movie. I see Jane as free from her demons. That's interesting. See, I think she's just totally lost her mind, and now she's reverted like psychologically back to what she wants to be. Like she knows she'll never be that big star again on the silver screen or in the eyes of society, but this is her way of reverting back to happiness. Baby Jane is 10 out of 10. I agree completely. Baby Jane ending is brilliant. I wholeheartedly agree. Great analogy on the poster. It also looks like the poster of Four Flies. Yeah, that's right. It does look like that. That's totally true. Yes, that's totally got some Argento in there. What's up, Mateo? Amanda Bynes was also great on the whoa, we just got a lot of comments and like it just skipped me ahead. Sorry. Amanda Bynes was also great in the sketch series, all that, especially Ask Ashley. Yes, she was on the phone. That was great. She was a great. It's so sad, man. I'm planning to Baby Jane on Blu-ray one of these days. It's a must-watch in my house. For some goddamn reason, I can't find the better Blu-ray of it. I don't know if there is a Blu-ray with features, but man, this is a movie that deserves a Blu-ray with a ton of features. And so does Hush Hush. And honestly, the Nanny too. Like the Nanny DVD was like $65 for the DVD. I was like, go fuck yourself. Like, I don't know if that one got a Blu-ray release, but it totally deserves it. Like all three of them deserve nice editions, and they just don't really have them. People saying, hi, you'd like the star having BR. It was before these films, like by 6 or 7 years. Okay, interesting. I'm used to fit the re-release of Wizard of Oz on 4K. Why are so many re-releases of films already on 4K being released again? This time I welcome this box set version, but we don't need so many re-releases. Yeah, no, listen, that's what they do. They'll, we'll release it in a steelbook and we'll get you to buy it again. How many times can we repackage the same thing? That's Hollywood's gimmick, man. Or I guess not studio, but the Blue Teak labels gimmicks. That's what they do. They just love to repackage shit. These are three movies that I have to own at some point. It's just, I looked at the prices and I was like, dude, these are bare bone Blu-rays. Like, how the hell do you not have nice special editions of extras? And like, I would love to hear hours and hours of extras on these movies. And the sad thing is a lot of these people are gone. Like Robert Aldrich died. I don't even know if did he die in the 80s? I think he died in the 80s. Joan Crawford died in the 70s. Bette Davis died in the 80s. Olivia de Havilland was with us all the way to 2020. She was like 100-something years old. So wild, man. But yeah, no, a lot of these people are gone. I saw it on Amazon. Not sure if it has any extras. Yeah, no, I saw the bare bones. It was like, I think an English Blu-ray, and it had nothing. I was like, dude, this just says I could easily just watch the movie on HD here. Like, there's no reason to spend $20, $30 for it. It doesn't have anything extra to offer, in my opinion. The last time the Cowboys won a playoff game, Bette Davis debuted in black and white film. Pat is throwing some shade at America's team. All right. But yeah, unless you guys have anything else you want to talk about here, whatever happened to Baby Jane rounds out the show with a perfect 10 out of 10. Hush Hush 10 out of 10. And then The Nanny is like an 8.5 to a 9 to me. I think it's a great movie. I really like The Nanny. I think it's a damn good movie. So all three of these I highly recommend. I don't think you can go wrong with any of them. Like I was saying, if you want the more electric over-the-top Bette Davis, you definitely lean towards Baby Jane. If you want the more straight up horror movie, I think you go Hush Hush. And I think if you want the psychological, depressing, dreary movie, you go with The Nanny, where Betty is very dialed back to like 5. Very good. All three of them are very good movies. Now, I guess I'll preview next week's show really quickly. Next week's show, we'll be doing a found footage horror special where we'll be reviewing Wreck. Wreck is definitely guaranteed. And we'll also be touching on 2 of the 3 movies that I currently have in the Grande's Graveyard community post. If you haven't voted, you can vote on 3 movies. It's The Last Broadcast, Hell House LLC, and I think the last one was Lake Mungo. Whichever one of those 3 gets the least amount of votes, we'll leave out of the next episode, and the other 2 will be reviewed with Rec. So next week, we go from 1960s Bette Davis horror all the way to found footage. So we're jumping all over the gambit here. But this was a really special show for me, and this is a show my grandmother would have absolutely loved not only to watch, but it would have been cool, if she was still here to have her be a part of it. Would have been really, really cool. So yeah, rest in peace to the greatest actress of all time, Bette Davis. R.I.P. to my grandmother. Really, really cool. Thank you so much to Miss C, who was kind enough to send that video to us and have it be a part of the show. Really cool to have somebody else's opinions on the show via video. So thank you so much, Miss C. Only Mateo throws up one of these. Hell yeah. Let's see. Nice guess, by the way. You should have that weirdo on more often. Fair enough. We're the weirdos, mister. Rusty, thank you so much. You were here the entire time. I appreciate all your comments and stuff. I'm happy. I feel like I'm always differ with you, and I'm happy for once in a change we're totally on the same page here. Because last week I buried Soul Survivors, which I know you like, and I apologize for shitting on so many movies you like. But I'm happy that we totally clicked on these movies at least. Nice show, good discussion. Thank you so much. Good point. Absolutely. Yeah. No. Everybody have a great weekend, Grani. Thank you so much, Sean. I appreciate that. Synth, man, it was awesome finally getting to sort of meet you over the roundtable chat that we did on Alpha's channel. That's like a 3-hour roundtable if anyone's interested in that. A lot of fun. Synth popped on for a little bit. Really, really cool guy. Linda Lou, thanks, Grande. Ciao. Linda Lou, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And everybody, have a wonderful, safe, happy, healthy weekend, and we will catch you next time. Only on the Graveyard. Too sweet, peace. Good night, everybody. So long.